What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we're going to be breaking down a Tankathon mock draft. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. You guys know how to use YouTube. Below my face is my board. These are all the guys who I have official grades on. It's over 100 that have been fully deep dived into, so super excited for that. So if you see names on this list and you're wondering, intriguing, apart from one or two names that you'll see, there is a video on all of them. So if we go and check those out, because those videos take a lot of work, they're going to be the positional videos. So feel free to go check those out. Let's get right into this. Below the board are all the great ways to get involved in the community, as well as take advantage of our two sponsors, UnderDog Fantasy, which I absolutely love them to death. I use that code 50% match of up to $250. Sends me a $60 check. And they're a great company. They actually take care of me very well. So I like to be able to hype them up wherever and whenever possible. So feel free, if you want to just enjoy spending some cash, being able to maybe make some money as well, while doing it very responsibly, do that. But let's get right into this. Make sure that you are, of course, of age and in areas where it's legal. Because, I'm required to say that. But also, Olipop is another sponsor of the show, mainly because I like getting discounts on their drinks. It's expensive. But let's get right into this, though. Starting out with the number one overall selection. Of course, they end up getting, they end up ranking dudes and ending up reshuffling all this stuff all the time. So it's something that I do like to be able to come back to. Actually, I think they do a better job than most sites on being able to make this, very pleasing to the eye. But James Pierce is the number one overall selection to the Panthers, edge rusher out of Tennessee. He is a very, very talented edge rusher. I think he has so many of the fine details that he needs to work on in the game. I think that, he simply just does not, he doesn't time his moves right. I feel like he's more show than actual tell, so to speak. He ends up doing a lot of really good things in space, but, I don't think he factors in how an offensive lineman is going to respond. The exact example I use all the time is the fact that he did a spin move right into J.C. Latham's chest. Like, it's not like he did it into his arm or anything. It was like straight to the middle of his torso. So that's just obviously something that you can't do. There's a lot to love in his game, though. Obviously, he has some good production in there. He's a great athlete. He is my edge, too. Going into number 2 overall, we have the Patriots selecting tackle / in my opinion, potentially guard Will Campbell. I think he can start at both positions. I ended up making a video on the tackle, so you can go check that out as well. Broshua and I ended up breaking down our opinions of the offensive line class as well on our stream last night. So feel free to go check that out. It was 3 hours long, 2 hours of actual straight draft content. And, those streams get almost no viewage, but we do it because we love you guys and it's fun. And it's basically a way for Broshua and I to catch up. Then we can go to number 3. Travis Hunter is the selection for the Denver Broncos, listed as a cornerback and as a wide receiver. He is my cornerback number 7. I still have not graded him as a wide receiver, but again, we're taking deep dives into these positions after doing our initial top of the class to be able to see where everybody lines up, where I can find my guys. And, you never know. Travis Hunter might end up being worth this much as a wide receiver. It is a relatively poor wide receiver class, so there's certainly a lot to potentially be had there. Kelvin Banks is a selection at number 4 to the Washington Commanders, tackle out of Texas. He is a really solid left tackle. To me, he's a fringe starter in the NFL, but there's a lot to love in his game. He's very powerful. He's a really good athlete. And, he just really needs to learn to put his hands on the inside of the chest plate. A lot of times he fires his hands very high. It pops guys in the face, and I'm not a fan of that. But Kelvin Banks has a lot of potential to me that is worth taking a swing on. Carson Beck is next at selection number 5 for the Tennessee Titans. Of course, if they are at number 5, you can start debating whether you want to go after another route because, to be fair, there's only going to be 2 years left of Will Levis, and, he wasn't a first-round pick, so you're not fully tied to him. But I personally think Will Levis was a better quarterback than Carson Beck. I don't think Carson Beck's a bad quarterback at all. I just am not overly passionate about his game in comparison to what, Will Levis could be. I think Will Levis has a superior arm, superior mobility, and just a superior processor. I think Carson Beck's a very good quarterback, but essentially he's just going to be a fringe starter for me in the NFL. I think that, you're basically going after someone who's a bit more safe, which, to be fair, Callahan is, made a lot happen with quarterbacks that are closer to, someone who's not going to be a physical phenom in Will Levis. Like, Carson Beck might be more towards the physical profile that you're looking at with Joe Burrow. A little bit better of an athlete, but still not the best arm velocity. The processor, I think, is nowhere near Joe Burrow's. But, I love Joe Burrow. I'm just trying to say that Carson Beck is closer to what the comfortability is with Callahan and the style of quarterback he goes. 6, we go Shedeur Sanders to the New York Football Giants, quarterback out of Colorado. He is, talent-wise, I think he's right there with Carson Beck. Like, they're relatively close to me. It's just you have so much baggage with the Sanders name, and I just don't know if he's an actual leader of a franchise. So for me, not over the moon about that. But at pick number 7, Quinn Ewers, quarterback out of Texas, goes to the Las Vegas Raiders. I thought that Quinn was a little inconsistent. He is just inside of my top 75 on my board. So he's not bad by any means. It's just when we're talking about him as a top 10 pick, I don't think he's a starter in the NFL. I think he's a developmental quarterback who needs to work on his deep ball. If you try to say that his deep ball is good, please just watch some games of his. It's actually atrocious. So he has like 1 or 2 good deep balls a year. Very happy that he can do it, but the fact is the NFL focuses more on consistency rather than just having one good flash play here and there. Unfortunately, that's the name of the game because every single player is so good at this point, you can't really make that many mistakes and end up expecting to be a starter. At number 8, we got the best player in the class, Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan, going to the Arizona Cardinals. Will Johnson, he's probably the best player I've ever graded because Sauce Gardner, it's really him and Sauce Gardner in terms of the top end grades. Like, they've been two of the guys who I fell in love with more than anybody. Will Johnson is a freak show. Like, you just don't see guys who are 6'2", over 200 pounds being able to move the way he does. And he's so smart. He even corrects his own mistakes. He corrects other players' mistakes mid-play. I think it's phenomenal. He's someone that you can rely on to be the head honcho of your team for probably a decade. Then we have Ben Morrison at pick 9 going to the Minnesota Vikings. He's physical. I would think that Flores would love the physicality in terms of that press man ability. At 186, he plays a lot larger than that. To me, he's a clear-cut number 2 in the class at the moment. At pick number 10, we have the Saints going wide receiver out of Missouri, Luther Burden. I don't know if it's a bad selection. He's going to be a slot primary, and that's okay. But, at number 10, unless you're getting an Amon-Ra St. Brown, I don't really expect that to be the overall archetype of the receiver that you'd get. Luther Burden has really poor effort on a lot of reps. That's one of the things I did not appreciate about his game, but talent-wise, I think that he's very, very solid. I ended up comping him to Deontay Johnson just with some potential motor concerns in there. So there's a lot to love about Luther, but at pick 10, I think it's a bit high. Harold Perkins, linebacker / edge rusher at LSU, goes to the Seahawks at pick 11. The only issue is that he's 220, right? He's too light to be a linebacker, and then that definitely means he's too light to be an edge rusher. But the talent that he has is unbelievable. We've seen him be able to pop up in plenty of games as one of the most dynamic athletes and one of the most dynamic players in the country. And, if he's somehow able to maintain his athleticism and skill level while adding on an extra 15 pounds, we certainly can be talking about this guy as a top 10 selection as a hybrid edge rusher. At pick 12, we got Abdul Carter, linebacker / edge rusher out of Penn State, going to the Indianapolis Colts. I don't really know why you would take him here. If I'm not mistaken, Tankathon might not be actually drafted by a specific person. So maybe this is just generated, but Abdul Carter is not a pure linebacker. He's switching to edge rusher this year, actually full-time anyways, but he was a linebacker / edge rusher last year, primarily linebacker because they had a pretty deep edge core. But Abdul Carter, I don't really think an edge rusher is going to be another position that the Colts would target. I think they would definitely start leaning more towards the offensive side if they're at pick 12 coming this year. Of course, you have to see why, but at pick 13, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers go Denzel Burke, cornerback out of Ohio State. I love Denzel Burke. He's one of the most consistent corners that you'll have in the draft. There's not really anything that you can point to his game and say is actually bad. He's gotten better every single year, except for a fact that he's had a bit of a drop-off after his true freshman year. But the good news is, by the end of his true sophomore year, he ended up playing really, really well. So he ended up rebounding. And to me, that means a little bit more than just having good play over multiple years. At pick 14, Malachi Starks goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, defensive back out of Georgia. One of the smarter safeties in the class. I'll be digging into them, so I'll have an actual opinion on Malachi coming soon. But he's someone who I expect to be in this range. I wouldn't be too mad if the Steelers were at least interested, but I think his role overlaps a little bit with Minka in terms of being that roamy defensive back that's more of a lurker for interceptions and pass breakups. Then at 15, we have Michigan pairing back up with Michigan with Mason Graham, defensive lineman, going to the Harbaugh system. So Mason Graham, he's one of the best block shedders that I've studied on the defensive interior. I think he is almost specifically going to be a pass rusher, but we'll see what happens when it comes about. I think this is a very smart move for the Chargers because you have that instant scheme fit. Obviously, he played in it literally a year ago as of this draft. So at pick 16, the Jaguars go Dayon Walker, defensive interior out of Kentucky. He's 6'6", stands straight up 6'6", and then he ends up getting knocked on his ass. So maybe he's, on average a 4'2", because when he's sitting on his butt, that's how tall he is. But Dayon Walker has really, really unique hand and foot movement especially for someone of that size. Problem is his leverage is absolute garbage. I don't trust him to be probably even a day 2 pick because of the fact that, there's just so much he needs to work on in terms of being consistent and actually being translatable to the NFL. I can guarantee you NFL guards and tackles and centers will knock him on his ass every play if he doesn't actually learn how to play the position. That being said, looking at the Jaguars, it's one of the teams I don't expect to be looking at defensive interior. At pick 17, Tetairoa McMillan, wide receiver at Arizona, goes to the Cleveland Browns, as if they don't need more receivers. It is what it is. But Tetairoa, to me, is someone who generates absolutely zero separation. Don't try to pull the Keon Coleman comps, but essentially apply what you were saying about Keon Coleman to an extreme degree here. The Tetairoa McMillan. He's not fast. He is relatively fluid, but he can't actually make sharp cuts. But his hands are arguably the best I've ever seen. It's up there with Michael Pittman Jr. So, there's certainly a role for that. But in the first round, I highly doubt it. At 18, we go Emory Jones, offensive lineman, technically tackle, but I would say potential guard, out of LSU, going to the Los Angeles Rams. He's a feisty motherfucker. He is my top offensive lineman in the class so far. But he has been, I just love the energy he brings. I want him to sit a little bit more into his heels because he ends up being on his toes way too often. At 19, the Jets go Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan. I think tight end's a good spot to target for the Jets, and I haven't studied the tight end class yet, but Colston Loveland, not a bad choice. I'll probably be digging into the tight end class in about a week and a half. At pick number 20, Mikael Williams, edge out of Georgia, goes to the Chicago Bears. He has unreal potential. At 265, he plays more like 235. He's pretty much a pure finesse edge rusher, which is super weird because I just don't think that he's built to be a finesse edge rusher. He has moments for sure, but I think that's why we haven't seen him really be able to thrive, is because he's playing a different game than what his frame suggests he should play. His play style as well. He's a good athlete, especially at 265, but for me, I'd rather see him drop to 245 and really fully develop his finesse technique rather than, pretty much be an awkward in-between. Then we have Emeka Egbuka at 21, a wide receiver at Ohio State, going to the Atlanta Falcons. With the amount of one-year contracts they have, this makes total sense. I'm not going to disagree with this at all. At 22, the Dolphins go Evan Stewart, wide receiver out of Oregon. I have Evan Stewart being a little bit closer to the bottom of my board. I think that he was pretty much a slant merchant. But at Oregon, they know how to use receivers really, really damn well, especially ones who are on the thinner side. So I think he's going to take a big step up this year. At pick 23, we got the Green Bay Packers going JT Tuimoloau, edge rusher at Ohio State. Developmental guy, but I honestly graded him, I think, the same, if not higher, than Lucas Van Ness. You guys know I was not a fan of Lucas Van Ness, but this is one of the systems I think he'd end up working in. I think that will end up being the case. I don't think they'll be looking for an edge rusher come 2025. At pick 24, we got Walter Nolan, defensive interior out of Ole Miss, going to the Texans. So I think that Walter Nolan's a freak athlete, but he's super undersized. He looks 330, but he actually weighs 290. I just am not really a huge fan of that, but he moves extremely well. I just think that, I would prefer someone with a little bit more size in the first round. I didn't think Walter Nolan's game matched up with the talent level required to make me feel comfortable with the sub 300 pounder here in the first. At pick 25, the Eagles go Nick Scourton, edge rusher out of Texas A&M, formerly Purdue. He's my number 3 player in the class at the moment, so you guys already know what I think. And I think he replaces Josh Sweat perfectly. I'd be a big fan of that. At 26, the Cowboys go Ollie Gordon, running back out of Oklahoma State. I think it's a very possible, very likely solution. He's a home run hitter. Has a good size to him. He's like 6'1", 6'2", 225 pounds. I thought that his ability to break tackles is not very translatable to the NFL, but he has good contact balance. There's pretty much nothing wrong with his game. He was utilized a lot in the receiving game, but it was on very simple routes, basically screens and swings. And so I don't really think he's developed as that, but luckily Deuce Vaughn might be your savior in terms of being that receiver back. At pick 27, Jack Sawyer goes to the Bills, edge rusher out of the Ohio State University. We'll speed this up a little bit. He's a developmental guy, good run defender. IQ's improved, but I don't think he's actually going to be a true NFL edge rusher. It's going to be just very, very, very long development cycle for him. Quinshon Judkins goes to the Bengals at 28, running back of Ohio State, formerly Ole Miss. He's a contact balance back. I think that is phenomenal. He's going to be someone you can rely on pretty damn consistently. At 28, that's really solid to value. Pick number 29, the Lions go Patrick Payton, edge rusher out of Florida State. He's somebody who he's also very flashy, but doesn't actually fully put it together. This year, he might end up taking that big step up now that he can be the true edge one. At pick 30, Tyler Booker, guard out of Alabama, goes to the Baltimore Ravens. I haven't graded him just yet. He's going to probably be the next guy I do grade, but Tyler Booker versus the defensive interiors I watched did a phenomenal job. This might be a steal. At pick 31, Princey Umamulan goes to the San Francisco 49ers, edge rusher out of Ole Miss, formerly Florida. This is great value for him. Technician, very similar in my opinion to what we saw last year from Latu, but Princey doesn't have that same work ethic, so this is a good range for him to go. Decario Davis then goes at pick 32, cornerback out of Arizona. He's just 6'4", about 200 pounds. Very, very high IQ. I think his change of direction is pretty garbo, which is unfortunate, but the fact is he's very efficient with his steps, and that's why he's been very, very productive. Excited to see what he's going to do in the NFL. How many rounds is this? It's only 2. We'll go for the second round as well. Why not? Tyleik Williams goes to the Bears at pick 33. This is technically still owned by the Bears from the Panthers pick. Tyleik's phenomenal. He is right now number 31 on my overall big board. So this is a good range for him to go. One of the top defensive interiors in the entire draft. I think he needs to develop his pass rushing ability, but I think this is he has a really, really solid foundation. At pick 34, Isaiah Bond, wide receiver out of Texas, formerly Bama, goes to the Patriots. He is my number 2 wide receiver, right? Yeah, he is. I loved his game to death. I really thought that he was a superstar there over at Alabama and just wasn't used enough. We'll see what happens when he ends up going to a system that, he's replacing a solidified role that had a lot of visibility last year. Pick 35, the Broncos go Kenneth Grant, defensive interior out of Michigan. Freak athlete. I will find it very, very hard to see him slipping out of the first round. But to me, right now, he's 47th on my board. It's just so ridiculous, the amount of talent that is around his range. He's very developmental, but certain teams that have that developmental capability, I think would be very, very happy with him. Danny Dennis-Sutton, edge rusher out of Penn State, goes at pick 36 to Washington. I think that they definitely need to be looking to invest in the future at edge rusher. I don't think they have a solidified actual starting edge. They have a lot of guys who are flex guys. Danny Dennis-Sutton doesn't really change that for me, but his high-end plays are phenomenal. At 270, he really does move like he's 250, and I love those movement skills, especially for someone that size. There's a lot of potential there. If he ends up working on his skill, which, gotta admit, I didn't really fully see Penn State develop their edge rushers that well. That's just a personal opinion of mine, and y'all know I'm a sucker for Penn State. I just don't trust Danny to take that big step up, but if he does, I'd be very, very happy. Jonah Savaiinaea is pick 37, right tackle at Arizona to the Titans. I think that's perfectly fine. He needs some time to develop, but this is luckily a team that, the fan base is proving to be relatively patient, especially if they end up showing that they're investing properly. At pick 38, the New York Giants go Ernest Green, offensive tackle, but in my opinion, actually offensive guard out of Georgia. I'll talk more about him as a guard in the future, but I thought he was a UDFA tackle. I know it's a really hot take, but I just really didn't like his game. I think he looked a lot more comfortable when he had blockers to both sides of him, when he's pretty much acting as a guard. I think he can actually be a really solid guard. This wouldn't be an awful range for him to go. Trey Henderson then goes at pick 39 to the Raiders, running back Ohio State. This is a good range for him. Pretty sure this is right where I have him too. 43rd on my big board. Really good vision. He's someone who can slip a lot of poor tackles, but it's pretty much vision and athleticism and then balance that makes him effective. He's not going to really make you miss, but he will make a poor tackler pay, and I do appreciate that about him. Very, very good back. Ohio State has a killer duo this year. At 40, Josh Connerly, left tackle, but in my opinion, probably could be moving to guard. Out of Oregon, goes to the Arizona Cardinals. Very, very good athlete. A ton of potential, no doubt. It's just on a consistency basis, not a huge fan of where he's at. And then his anchor certainly makes me think that he should be not dealing with edge rushers who get multiple steps to generate enough speed and transitioning it to power. At pick 41, we got Trey Harris, wide receiver out of Ole Miss, going to the Bills via the Vikings. This is the Stephon Diggs trade. Trey Harris is very, very underdeveloped. He's a very fun player to watch, no doubt, but he's extremely underdeveloped. I think that he's relatively role specific, and at 41, that's a bit early. To be fair, there's not many great receivers in this class, but Trey Harris definitely, he's a fun player to watch. I do think this is a very realistic range for him to go. At pick 42, the Saints go Barrett Carter, linebacker out of Clemson. Barrett Carter is a fun linebacker to watch. That's going to be the next position group I watch after interior offensive line. So keep your eyes out for that. But Barrett Carter was actually going to be arguably up there with Edgerrin Cooper for the top linebacker of the class last year. This class already has quite a few guys who I think, based on what I saw last year, will be able to compete and do a very good job potentially in the NFL. At pick 43, we got Jalen Milroe, quarterback out of Alabama, going to the Seahawks. It's a very, very, very solid system for him to go to. He has time to develop. They appreciate athleticism, and they appreciate someone with an arm. So I think this is a great spot for him to go if they don't have faith in Sam Howell, which I would pretty much doubt that they would not have faith because they traded for him. At pick 44, Jabbar Muhammad, slot corner. He plays boundary, but at 5'10", he plays a little bit more like a slot. Out of Oregon, goes to the Colts. I think that's fine. He can play both, but, I just personally would prefer him to at least have a clear-cut role as a slot. He's a feisty player. Right now, I think he's number 16th on my board. Where the hell did I put him? I'm tripping. Oh, he's at number 22. He's a fun player to watch. I really do appreciate his game overall. The ferocity is no doubt there, but I do think he processes the game relatively poorly outside of the guy he's focusing on. He kind of puts blinders on, but if you want him to lock onto a player, that player's not really going to ever succeed. Landon Jackson goes at pick 45, edge rusher out of Arkansas, to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's a bit early for me, but he is not a bad edge rusher at all. Great size and ability for that size. It's just, I didn't see it being fully NFL translatable, so I can't really give him overly bright reviews. Donovan Jackson, left guard out of Ohio State, goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers at 46. We'll see if we really believe in Mason McCormick, but I think Donovan Jackson would be a smart move based on the fact we're not trying to extend James Daniels. At pick 47, Shamar Turner, defensive interior / edge rusher out of Texas A&M, goes to the Chargers. I think he's more of an edge rusher, but this is actually a great team for him to potentially replace Bosa or Mack. So we'll see what happens there. He is a top 20 player on my board. Kevin Winston Jr., I've heard a lot of positive things about him. Safety out of Penn State, going to the Jaguars. It's a team that needs a corner, so I'm really hoping that they end up getting a corner, because so far I haven't really seen too much in terms of positive movement for the Jaguars in this draft. But, I'm a sucker for Penn State DBs. Broke my heart what happened last year with Kalen King, but, it is what it is. Dante Corleone goes at pick 49, defense interior out of Cincinnati. He's, I think, my third worst player I've ever graded this year. So not a fan of him at all. I thought that he was actually worse than the 7th rounder that was next to him in Briggs. Pick 50, Howard Cross out of Notre Dame, defense interior, goes to the Panthers. This is via Los Angeles. I think Los Angeles did this when they're traded for Braden Fisk. Funnily enough, Howard Cross is not too far off of talent-wise from Braden Fisk. At pick 51, Xavier Nwakpa, safety out of Iowa, goes to the Jets. This is a great selection for them. The cool thing is Xavier Nwankpa was someone who I saw 3 years ago. I guess it's like 2.5 at the All-American Bowl that I really, really liked. Josh Gray, left tackle, but interior offensive lineman out of Oregon State, goes to the Bears. It's a bit of a shank in my opinion. I think the Bears need to be continuing to focus on edge rusher, defensive interior, and then even getting another wide receiver. At pick 53, Smail London Jr., linebacker out of Georgia, goes to Atlanta. Love seeing guys stay there in the mid-Georgia area, but I'm not really a huge fan of Smail London based on my initial analysis of him. Bear Alexander, defensive interior out of USC, goes to the Dolphins. He has the best talent in the class, I think, out of the defensive interior players. I think his conditioning is not very good, and that's also indicative of his overall motor, because a lot of guys have issues with the personality. Denver Harris, cornerback out of UTSA, goes to the Packers at pick 55. I've heard a lot of good things about him. He's somebody who there's just not enough all-22 out there to actually be able to study him. So TBD on him. Very excited to see some tape pop up for UTSA. Danny Stutzman, linebacker of Oklahoma, goes to the Texans. He was going to actually be a linebacker 2 last year if he ended up coming out, so happy with this range for him. Wyatt Millam, left tackle out of Virginia, goes to the Eagles at 57. I think this is an absolute shank. He's the worst tackle I've graded this year. Blake Miller, who's next, is a much better selection. Wyatt, just on a consistent basis, is really, really poor. At pick 58, though, Blake Miller, right tackle out of Clemson, goes to the Cowboys. It'd be intriguing for them to go after another right tackle after going Tyler Guyton, but Blake Miller is my number 3 tackle in the class. I think that's perfectly fine. At pick number 59, Torrey Horton, wide receiver out of Colorado State, goes to the Buffalo Bills. I want to watch some Colorado State All-22. There's just not much out there right now, so TBD on that as well, but very, very excited to watch him. At pick 60, Ashton Galote goes to the Bengals. This is a team that doesn't need an edge rusher at all, but Ashton's someone who's extremely fun, very versatile. You can kick him to the inside if you want to, and I just really don't appreciate the fact he has 0 bend, but it's not the role that you'd ever play him in. Xavier Watts goes at 61 to the Lions, safety out of Notre Dame. Again, I haven't studied the defensive back class yet past the corners and into the safeties, so TBD on that. Ashton Jeanty goes at number 62 to the Baltimore Ravens. That would be an excellent pickup on their behalf. He's my number 5 back, and that's only because of the amount of fumbles he's had. He had 5 last year. Of course, Broshman said this very well. They were usually on the second effort. Basically, he's trying to drag a guy and then the ball gets punched out, but simply put, you have to be able to control the ball. Pick 63, a Johnny Cornelius, tackle out of Oregon, right tackle out of Oregon, goes to the Niners. Super smart tackle. I just think he's a little bit underwhelming overall, but someone who's actually the best processor out of the offensive line class from my estimation. Not a bad pick at all. Then at 64, oh, here we go again. I know my boy Chris is going to lose his mind at this one. Nazir Stackhouse. Nazir Stackhouse, in my opinion, I'll be completely blunt here, he's not draftable for me. When I watched him first play, he was always the last guy off the ball. He was always the guy showing the least amount of effort and the guy who's actually pretty much the least talented on the entire Georgia defense. There's no reason for him to be here at pick 64. I'll need to go back and rewatch him when I do the deep dive because I've thrown out all my former grades because I'm just saying, screw it, I'm going to watch them all new. But let's just say I'm not a fan. It's going to be him and Dante Corleone at the bottom, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll see. But that's going to be the video. Thank you so much for watching. I love y'all. See you on the far side. Peace.